Usually when I hold a mic, I'm going to sing a song, but I'm not going to do that tonight. Instead, I really want to tell you a little bit about how we've gone from Sputnik and Silent Sam and Terry Sanford to where we are today. And some of you may never have seen a picture of what Durham looked like in the 1960s. Because I think the question is how did RTP really get going, and how did part of the National Institutes of Health end up down here in RTP? So tobacco was starting, I mean, if you remember, it was 1964 when smoking was declared a carcinogen by the Surgeon General. And I think we want to remember that this was a really problem town. Tobacco was going. The textile industry had left. What was going to happen in this area? And, let's see, okay. Some of you may recognize this vote. This man was Terry Sanford, who was governor of North Carolina. He was also a senator later on. But he is the one who is really responsible for bringing NIEHS down here to North Carolina. Now, how did that happen? Well, in 1960, maybe you may remember, there was a presidential election which occurred. And Terry Sanford, actually, this is a picture of him nominating Jack Kennedy to be the Democratic candidate for president in 1960. Now, this was really quite a brave thing for him to do. In fact, Sanford received death threats because if he did it. I mean, Kennedy, as you all know, was an Irish Catholic from Boston, and that was not a favorite kind of person down here in North Carolina. But he was able to deliver North Carolina to the Kennedy column, and that meant that Jack Kennedy won the presidency with, I think it was 49.7% of the vote compared to Dick Nixon's 49.5% of the vote. So that was a pretty major success story. And as a result of that, Kennedy promised to bring something big down here to North Carolina. Now, you may remember that Sputnik went up in 1957, and it was clear that the US was way behind Russia in its scientific experience at that time. And then Rachel Carson published her groundbreaking book Silent Spring, which talked about the loss of birds and other critters from chemicals that were being put into our environment. And that led to the decision that Kennedy made to put an environmental institute down here. So we are the only part of the National Institutes of Health that is not headquartered in Bethesda. In fact, we're headquartered down here. And we put over $250 million a year into the local economy, over $25 million to our local grantees, but we have a very robust intramural, actually two intramural programs that are located down here, very exciting. But our total budget for the National Institutes of Health, for NIEHS specifically, is over $790 million a year. And we hope that we're doing a lot of good with that. Now, what we want to talk about very briefly here, and I want to make the point that NIEHS was the first large tenant to announce that they were coming to the park. The second large one was IBM, and that everything else is really history there. But we want to talk a little today about genes and the environment, and a point that I'm going to make and hope you will understand is that nothing is just genes and nothing is just the environment. Everything is the interaction between genes and the environment. And I want to briefly mention two large studies that we have ongoing. One is called the Sister Study, and this is a study of nearly 51,000 women who are sisters of women who have breast cancer. And many of you know that if you're a woman and your sister or your mother or your maternal aunt or your maternal grandmother had breast cancer, you are at increased risk. And we are following these sisters for at least 10 years and trying to study what it is in their genes interacting with things in their environment that will cause some of these women to develop breast cancer while others won't. The other study I wanted to briefly mention, which is also happening partly in North Carolina, but we're studying over 50,000 farmers and 30,000 of their wives, either in North Carolina or Iowa. And these studies have been going on for over 20 years now. And what we're looking, again, is the relationship between exposure to pesticides, genes, and the environment. And so, for example, we have found a very high risk If you're exposed to certain pesticides and you have a certain type of gene which is involved in getting rid of the pesticide, that those people have a risk of Parkinson's disease of over 11-fold. While if you don't have that gene, you have a very slightly increased risk. So it's very exciting for us to have the opportunity to be here. I hope some of you saw our banner when you came in that talks about this is our 50th year. So we were actually established here in November 1st, 1966. We're going to be having celebrations all year long. I hope you'll come and join us for some of them. And I'd like you all to remember that you can't change your genes, but you can change your environment. So thank you.